Well, hello, everyone. I'm glad you could make it for our 5th Wanderlust series. It's perfect for a cold, rainy night. Kind of sets the mood of what we're going to hear, I think. So, if it's your first time joining, you're in luck because there's one more after this. And Jolene is the wizard behind the curtain. She's recording this, so you can listen to it later if you can't get the whole thing tonight. But it's just nice to have these to kind of bridge us into the sailing season early May, which we're going to have a good start to the season that way. So I'll just say, hold on to your life jackets, for Gary and Jeanine are going to share quite the adventure with you this evening.
All righty, so just a few logistics for everybody. As Barb said, welcome. We are recording the session tonight, and we'll post a link to it on YouTube once it's uploaded, but I just want everyone to know that it is being recorded. Your videos and mics should be off during the presentation. It saves on bandwidth, and we ask that you keep them off. So if you don't have them turned off now, please do so. Otherwise, we will do it for you, and you might not be able to turn it back on again. Let's see. And then if you can just keep them off, at the end, we'll do a Q&A session. And at that time, if you want to turn your mics and or your cameras on at that point, you can certainly do that. I will let you know when that time arrives. If we kind of run over, if the Q&A is still going at 8 o'clock, we'll just keep going until there aren't any more questions. So if people need to log off, that's fine, we understand. But otherwise, we hope you'll be able to hang out and enjoy the conversation and questions afterwards. During the session, you can feel free to put your questions in the chat, and me and some of the other committee members will keep an eye on those as best we're able to, and we will read those off when we get to the Q&A session. If you put a question in there and we don't get to it, please feel free when we get to the end to put it in again or turn on your mic or your camera and ask it live. Our plan is to get to all of them, so if we missed you, it is just an oversight, nothing intentional. Let's see, and then when you do the Q&A, if you could just send those to everybody. There's a drop-down menu, just pick everyone so that all of the committee members can see them to help out with that. And we would just ask that you keep all of your questions, the live questions, until the end. So with that, Jeanine and Gary, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, well, I will start. We're calling this To Catch a Thief, and this is an adventure that Gary and I and my daughter Josie and her boyfriend Highland went on from Villefranche-sur-Mer to Viareggio. Oops. Okay, here we go. So what was the inspiration for this trip? And it actually started when I was doing a little shopping in a secondhand shop, and I saw these photographs. I love vintage things, and I thought these sailboats were beautiful. And on the upper right-hand corner of these prints, it says Beckham of cows. I Googled that on my iPhone in the shop and found out that this guy named Frank Beckham, I'm trying to forward my slide here and I'm not sure why it's not forwarding here. Okay, here we go. Frank Beckham was actually a pharmacist. And so I've been trained as a pharmacist. I'm a licensed pharmacist in the state of Minnesota. And I thought, this is interesting. So this guy named Frank Beckham was a pharmacist in 1888. He and his father had a pharmacy business, and they moved to Cowes in the Isle of Wight in England. And he was he became interested in the regattas that he saw in the Solent in Cowes. And he was so inspired and mesmerized by these beautiful regattas that he started taking pictures, and he actually developed a new type of camera so that he could take better pictures. And he would stand in a small boat rocking in the waves in the Solent and wait until these boats in the regatta filled up about 75% of his view and then snap a picture. And it actually became, he took thousands of pictures, and he trained his sons, who inherited the pharmacy business, continued to take pictures of regattas in cows. And these are in the Beckham Marine Photography Archive, and they're still in cows, in a shop in cows. And I saw this and I thought, wow, I would love to go there and go to cows and see what this is all about. And of course, there's the Cows Week Regatta. And I talked to Chet about it, and we both travel a bit for scientific research. So we both said, hey, if we ever have a research meeting in England, maybe we should take a few days of vacation and go to cows. Well, as it was, we got invited to a research meeting in London, and it was in October. And I checked to see if anything was going on in cows in October, and there was a regatta. In the meantime, I'd been looking at how do you get experience, or how do you get an opportunity to sail on a vintage boat? And I was looking on one of the online crew seeking websites and came across a beautiful boat. I love the red sails, and it was called the Telstar, and they were looking for crew for some vintage regattas in Europe at the same time that Chet and I were going to England, or right around that time. I emailed the captain. I said, hey, I will be in the area. I might take a few days vacation. Could you use crew during these certain dates? And he said, yes. So Chet was not able to sail with us on that regatta, but my daughter and I decided we would go. She and I like to do a mother-daughter trip once a year or twice a year. And we contacted this Captain Per Landon, and he said, yes, you and your daughter can join us on the Telstar. And then Josie's boyfriend, Highland, said, wait a minute, I want to go. And so I emailed Per again. He said, sure, Highland can go. And then I was at a yacht club party back in the day when we had those. And Gary was there, and he mentioned he had a family reunion in Florence, Italy, around that same time. Well, the regatta that Per said we could participate in was taking place in Viareggio, Italy, just a couple hours from Florence. So, of course, I said, wow. Oh, what? Problems? Okay. So I asked Gary, hey, by chance, would you be available to crew? And I can ask Per about this. And so then we had a crew of 4 people coming from the WYC Yacht Club to crew in a vintage regatta in Cowes on this boat called the Telstar. Now, Gary, do you want to give, you're better at this, do you want to give some information on the Telstar, some of the specs on it?
Okay, the Telstar, and I can answer questions, I'll monitor and answer questions on the chat also. Most of the information is right there. She's built in 63, and Per had just been refurbishing it and has been sailing it the last 5 years, I think it was. And we met with him on the Mediterranean. But it's a beautiful all wood hulled boat. It's a shoot, where'd my notes go? It's a Bermuda. Sorry, I lost my notes here. Go ahead, Jeanine. I'm going to come back to that.
So this boat was designed by this company called the Sangermani yacht making company. It's a family in Italy, and the plan with Per was to meet him someplace near Nice or Cannes in France on the French Riviera, and sail with him across the Mediterranean to Viareggio, and that would be about 125 nautical miles. And he would train us as we sailed. He would help kind of orient us to things so that we could know what we were doing during the regatta, know what our roles were. And so we all thought this sounded very exciting. We booked our flights into Nice, France, and Per said, I'll let you know when you arrive, or close to the time you arrive, I'll let you know exactly where the Telstar and I are. They thought they might be in Saint-Tropez, but they'd be someplace on the French Riviera. And that also brings in my other motivation here was I had never been to the French or Italian Rivieras, and I had always wanted to go. One of my favorite old movies is To Catch a Thief by Alfred Hitchcock. And I think I've seen it 20, 25 times, if not more than that. And it's got Cary Grant, my favorite old movie star, and Grace Kelly. And it takes place in the French Riviera. And I always thought, wow, if I ever get a chance to go there, I'd love to do that. So here is my chance in my midlife crisis years to go to the French Riviera. And so we were all set up to go and found out just a couple of weeks before we left that the Telstar had dismasted. I think it was in a 18 knots of wind on some high sea. There were some high billows on, and it was racing and had dismasted. So we were like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen now? I contacted Per, and he said, yeah, it dismasted, yeah. And I said, well, we still plan to come. We booked our tickets. We don't want to, can we get a different boat? Do you know if there's another way we could race in the regatta? Or can we actually just help you do some work on the boat, on the Telstar? Because the four of us are very interested in vintage boats. We learn a lot, and we would still love to come to the French Riviera. And Per said, well, yeah, I don't, yeah, maybe, and he was a little bit vague. And I said, well, Per, we have booked our flights, we're coming, and I actually paid him to do this extravagant trip. And the plan was to stay and live on his boat during the time we were there. So it was all kind of in the cost that I'd budgeted for this. And I said, well, can we come, and can we at least, live on the Telstar with you and help you if, worst case scenario, we helped you with repair some things on this boat. And Gary's really handy with this stuff. Highland's very mechanical, and we'll see what we can do. And he was a little bit vague, but he's like, yeah, okay, yeah. So we show up, the four of us, in Nice, and we take a cab to Villefranche-sur-Mer. And this French word means French village on the sea. And we showed up at a little restaurant there, and I contacted Per. I said, hey, we're in this restaurant in Villefranche-sur-Mer. Now I knew he was there because when we landed at the airport, I told him we were at the airport, and he said, oh, I'm in Villefranche-sur-Mer. And I said, well, we're taking a cab there. So then I said, well, we're in the restaurant, Per. Can we meet you? And he's like, yeah, I'm busy right now. I'm busy. I said, well, I'll buy you dinner. And he's like, okay, I'll come over. So he showed up, and we had a lovely dinner with him. And he agreed to let us stay on his yacht, however, not the Telstar, because that was basically sort of the flooring had been the flooring on the deck had been torn up, and everything was sort of in disarray on the Telstar. So he said the only place that we could possibly stay is on his power yacht, which was in the harbor there, as well as the Telstar. And we said, well, that will be fine. And he said, well, yeah, I don't think that you may not like it. Because there's no running water, the toilets don't work, the kitchen doesn't work, and I mean, it's a place where you can sleep, but it's not, I don't think you'll like it. Maybe you should get a place in town. And we said, well, we really didn't plan on that, so we would like, at least for tonight, to stay on your boat. And we talked about the possibility of finding a different boat to race on, and he said he was working on that. So that evening we went out to stay on his yacht in the harbor there in Villefranche-sur-Mer. And this is not our view. This is actually a view of his yacht and the Telstar. So his yacht is, I'm not sure if you can see my pointer, but there it is on the left, obviously. And it looked lovely from a distance, and it actually was a beautiful yacht, but it was also in disrepair. And there's plenty of room though for us to sleep on there. He took us into town every day in the dinghy, and we were able to explore the area. So we ended up staying with him on that power yacht for about 4 days. And the Telstar is actually on the right-hand side of the picture. It was actually sort of tethered to the yacht there in the harbor. And here's another view of the from the boat looking into the beautiful village. Now, this I thought was an interesting picture that I took from inside the yacht. the police showed up one day before we went into town. We were getting ready to go into town. The police show up, and that is the little runabout you see on the right hand side. And there's the Telstar in the distance, and it's tied up to the power yacht. And they did not like that because it was a hazard right there. It was, the line was not visible, and it could be a hazard to other boats. And I took this picture, and then I realized after taking it, there's a little model ship right here in the foreground with that is also dismasted. So I thought, wow, is that strange? I've got the maybe that's some kind of symbolic thing that someone's trying to tell me something here. But anyway, we lived on his boat, and it was lacking amenities, but you could tell it had a history of being a beautiful yacht, and he was trying to fix it up. And Highland actually found a guitar and would sing to us at night, which was he's really talented. And every morning, Per would make us breakfast. Here's breakfast on his yacht. He'd make us a Swedish breakfast, and it was delicious. And he didn't use butter. He used some kind of tube of some oil or fluid from some whale or something. I was trying to figure out what exactly it was, but it was what he used instead of butter. I guess that's what they do a lot of the time in Sweden. And during the day, during that four-day period, we did a lot of hiking around the area. And it was so beautiful that we really weren't feeling too sad about not having a nice boat to race on in Viareggio. This is one of the paths that we hiked up. All four of us improved our physical condition doing this hiking. And one day we hiked up to this old fort built in the 1500s, and we hiked on from there to Nice. Here's looking from the fort down into the harbor. This was the beach in Nice. Now, because I love the old Alfred Hitchcock movie, To Catch a Thief, I was hoping the beach would look like the picture on the right, which I think was taken in Cannes in front of the Carlton, but that was a picture from the movie. But the beach was actually very empty that day, but still lovely. We also hiked up to a villa near Villefranche-sur-Mer, and it was owned by the Rothschild family. They actually had the largest private wealth during the 1900s, a banking family, and this was one of their many homes. They donated it to France as a museum, and it was absolutely beautiful. Here's some of the rooms. You could see the Mediterranean from the house out of many windows, gorgeous gardens. They had a little terrace where Gary and I sat down and took a break because we'd hiked about 12 miles by that time. And I ordered some meringue, and I thought it would taste like sort of store-bought meringue or something from a 7-Eleven or something. And it was made from their family recipe, and it was homemade. And I thought, well, it can't be that much better than what I get at Lund's. I buy those little meringue cookies at Lund's and eat them all the time. I bit into it and I started crying. It was amazing. And I thought, oh, this is what it means to taste something that's actually, something really special, and made with the old family recipe. From that terrace, we said, hey, we can see the Telstar. And if you see here on the left-hand side, just to the right of this little twig, there's the Telstar, and on the other side is Per's yacht. The final day of hiking was a adventurous, ambitious plan to hike to Monaco. And so we were hiking along these roads that were on the straight down bluff type things, and the very narrow roads with zero shoulder. We got about halfway to Monaco, and we were dodging all these cars on that road, and decided to take a train the rest of the way. Plus we were exhausted. So we went to the Prince's Palace in Monaco. Now this is where Grace Kelly from To Catch a Thief actually lived, because she married the Prince of Monaco after making that movie. And that was kind of where she met him, was during the time she made that movie. So she lived in the palace with him. Here's the Port of Hercules in Monaco, famous port. And then we went back to Villefranche-sur-Mer. Now, Per contacted us and said, hey, I found a boat. I found a boat in Viareggio, and they're going to let us race. They're looking for crew, and they know that there's 4 of us. It's actually a really big boat, and it's a schooner. So it's not a yawl, which the Telstar was a yawl. And he said, but I think you'll like it. It's a schooner. He said, but we have to leave at 4 a.m. tomorrow morning. It's about a 3.5-hour drive to Genoa. We're going to the port of Genoa, and we will board this schooner, and then we will sail it starting 8 a.m. in the morning, 80 nautical miles to Viareggio. So we were very excited. This is our meeting to discuss that. Per wasn't there at the time, but we were excited. We had a nice dinner in Villefranche-sur-Mer, and it was a lovely evening. I just remember that evening fondly. I actually drank a lot of limoncello, so maybe that was part of it. But we also discussed at that dinner Per's car, because Per was going to drive us to Genoa, and bless his heart, he had a car and was going to do this, but I'd actually helped him carry some stuff to the car a few days earlier, and I wasn't sure if that car could make it to the port of Genoa. Gary and Highland and Josie said, Mom, you're being a helicopter mom. You're being too worried about everything. I think that you just need to stop worrying. We'll be fine. So we set out the next morning, and this was our route from the left side there from the French Riviera up to Genoa, which is in the Italian Riviera, of course. If you look at this picture, actually, the French Riviera kind of goes from the left side, and then the Italian Riviera starts at the border between France and Italy and ends approximately at Viareggio. So we basically traveled the entire French Riviera on this trip. But here's Per's car at one of the many stations we stopped at with the hood open. We had numerous bouts of car trouble on the way to Viareggio. And we had started in the dark, and basically we were kind of on some mountain passes too for a while. We were kind of zigzagging back and forth. The car kept stalling, and it would just stop running. And so he would pull over to the side, and every time that happened, it seemed like out of nowhere, 3 or 4 Italian polizio would come up in their motorcycles and start circling us and yelling at us in Italian and wanting us off the road. They did not want, on these narrow roads with some of them being elevated bluffs and some of them sort of zigzagging around, they did not want a big station wagon stalled there in the dark when people might be going to work soon in morning traffic, etc. So they were angry with us, and they kept saying, get your car off the road. I guess that's the interpretation. Per interpreted the Italian for us. And we would start up and go another half hour or so. We'd get it started, and then it would stall again. So we eventually sort of, by chance, it stalled right in front of a train station in one of these little villages. And I said to Per, I said, why don't we just take a train to Viareggio? We're going to be late. They're going to be waiting for us. We're not going to make this deadline of 8 a.m. And he's like, oh yeah, I think we might be able to get the car going. And I said, Per, I'll pay for tickets for all of us. We'll just get on the train and go. And it's like, okay. So we took the train to Viareggio. We got there 4 hours late. It was noon by the time we got there. And Per was texting the captain and saying, we're on our way. Can you wait for us? And they were very nice to wait for us. We rolled our luggage through the streets, and this was our first sighting of the schooner that we were going to be racing on. And we just couldn't believe our eyes. We were like, wow, this is really a fantastic vintage boat. And it was just beautiful. And the more we learned about it, the more interested we became in it. But this is in the port of Genoa, and there's our boat, and they're waiting for us to get on the boat. And they had planned on leaving at 8 a.m., as I said. And as you can see, it's getting stormy out, and now it's noon. So unfortunately, we were not able to sail. They decided to motor the boat into Genoa as quickly as, or into Viareggio as quickly as possible. The name of the boat is the Invader, and it's actually kind of a famous schooner. It was built in 1905. Gary did a lot of research on the history, and I don't know if you want to mention a few things here, Gary, about the interesting facts about the history of the Invader.
Yeah, well, okay, that's the under the owners and stuff. The boat was built in 1905 for the 1906 America's Cup, but it never participated because they could not find enough experienced crew. It took 30 to 35 crew to race the boat. Nearly 10 of them are required up in the mast, up in the rigging, to take down and reset all of the upper sails for each tack. And then it takes 11 people to actually handle the main. So they had a hard time finding experienced crew. In 1914, well, originally in 1905, it had no motor. It was extremely fast and lightweight. In 1914, they had two 100 horsepower motors installed. In 24, and that was for sailing it in the Great Lakes and Arctic exploration. 1924, it was named the Nancy Lee and moved to the West Coast. During World War I, it actually patrolled the West Coast as a naval vessel and training. In 1926, it won the Transpac. It held the Transpac record for 23 years and the 24-hour record until 1977. Then it became a floating casino. It did trade with South America. In 77, it lost its sailing vessel status in Hawaii. In 88, it became a 200-seat restaurant or diner capable of 300 standing cocktail partiers and was fitted for whale watching. It also was used for smuggling with Mexico. From there, she went to Europe in 2000, where she was completely disassembled, and by freighter and by train, she was shipped to Viareggio, sorry, I can't pronounce that very well, in pieces to be reconstructed. And she was rebuilt from scratch, basically from scratch to the original specifications between 2001 and 2003. From 2003 on, she was then chartered out and privately owned, and is for sale now for about $5 million. And she charters for about 55,000 euros a week. So, okay, sorry, I went off.
Thanks, Gary. No, thank you so much. That was you added some things that I hadn't yet heard, so that's amazing. So some of the Invader owners, we've got them listed here, and one of the interesting ones is 1929 to 1935, Joseph Schenck, and he was actually involved in like a Hollywood producer, and a lot of movie stars spent time in the Invader back in the day. This is a list of some of them: Charlie Chaplin, John Barrymore, Buster Keaton, Clark Gable, Paulette Goddard, Gloria Swanson. I love old movies, so I'm familiar with all these characters. The guy in the picture here is Douglas Franks, and he lived aboard the Invader while he was filming the movie called Mr. Robinson Crusoe in Tahiti. This is a picture in the foreground is Charlie Chaplin and Paulette Goddard on the Invader, and I believe that's Mr. Schenck in the background. I don't know who the woman is with him. And Gary went over some of the information on the Invader. Some of these specs here are interesting. Is a steel hull, teak decks, mahogany millwork throughout, 162 feet long. When you include the bowsprit and the boom that extends over the stern, it's actually 193.4 feet. Here is, I'll introduce you to some of our crew on the Invader. The first is Captain Mckelly, and here he is standing under the boom, and there's the binnacle there. The boom is resting on a cradle. That boom weighs 2,000 pounds. This is the first mate, Timothy. There's Josie there in the dress. During the actual regatta, we were all made to wear the Invader uniforms, and they had some extra clothing on hand, so we all had to fit into them as best we could and wear matching uniforms. This is the second mate, Toby, and he is working on the mainsail. The mainsail weighs 4,000 pounds. And here's the steward and hostess, the chef, Alex. Here's two more crew, Skittles on the left and Azir on the right. And these were the paid crew when we boarded the Invader. Now here's the unpaid deckhands, Gary and myself, Daydreaming, and Josie and Highland. Here's Josie again. And here's the instrument panel on the Invader. So this is obviously updated, basically state of the art. Below deck was amazing. Again, it was mahogany millwork and hardwood flooring, inlaid patterns on the flooring. Here's the mahogany bar, formal dining room. This is one of the guest staterooms. This one actually had two heads with a shower. Every stateroom had at least one head with a shower and a toilet and a bidet, and granite countertops. This is the companionway, looking from above, looking down, and on either side you see these cubby holes. We had to take our shoes off whenever we went down below because of the hardwood flooring. And so that was a rule on the boat, no shoes down below. You'd put your deck shoes in the cubby hole and then you'd put them back on when you came up. And this is looking from down below, looking up the companionway. This is just one of the light fixtures. The light fixtures were brass and had an etched glass globe that showed a picture of an old ship on the wall when you turned them on. Here's some of the blocks. Now these are not the biggest blocks, but my foot on the left is next to one of the blocks. And the brass plate on the block says the Invader on it. Here's some of the rigging. And this was taken that first night on our way into Viareggio. We went through a rainstorm, and then it became beautiful at sunset, and we were just entering Viareggio. It was too late to go into the quay and anchor in tie up in a slip there, so we anchored in the harbor. But here's a view of some of the boats in Viareggio. And the next day was the first day of the regatta. We got up and we were excited. We were going to go sailing. And it was a beautiful day. It was about 70 degrees. The wind was light, but it was enough to sail with. I was remembering 12 to 14 knots. Gary was thinking it might be a little lighter than that. But this regatta was called the Veal Staris Regatta. And I do not speak Italian, so someone can correct me. But what that means is a sailing, Veal stands for sail, the first word. Staris means history or historic regatta. And the boats in the regatta were all historic boats. Oh, I should say that the man in the red slacks in the background, this was one of a number of men that were brought in from Viareggio that day to help us sail this boat. The crew, the paid crew on the boat had just arrived on the boat before we did. They had never sailed on this boat. They were experienced, but were not experienced on this boat. And that was one reason why I think Per was able to talk the captain into letting more crew come on. In addition, they hired some crew from Viareggio to come on the boat. And we wanted to raise that gap, the number of sails here, but that big gaff sail that weighs 4,000 pounds. And I'll just play a short video here of us actually trying to raise it. The throat of the sail attaches to the mast, and the other end of the sail is called the peak. And it's very critical that the that the gaff piece, the wood on the top, is at a certain angle. You can hear the first mate giving orders on how to raise this thing. It was, they were actually using electric winches to raise this. So you know, in the early life of this boat, of course, it would have been manpower raising this big sail. But the men from Viareggio were in the stern using electric winches. The extra men that had come in from Viareggio, they were sitting in the stern using their feet to operate electric winches. I don't know how long it would take manpower, a bunch of good sailors in, say, 1920 to raise this mainsail. But it took us a long time to do it with the electric winches. I would say it seemed like forever to get this sail up. And I won't play the entire raising, but you'll see about partway up, the wind starts to catch this big heavy sail with the 2,000-pound boom. And Gary said, "Oh, that's fine, don't worry." But I was getting a little worried because it was starting to oscillate back and forth. So he's saying, go peek, go throw it. He's trying to get it raised at a certain angle on the top.
The rings you see on the mast, those are actually wood rings wrapped in leather. And that is what's holding the mainsail to the mast as it goes up.
And Gary, didn't you say there's like wooden wheels in there or something that help it roll up, or no?
No, that was up at the throat.
The saddle? Okay.
Where the saddle was.
So we eventually got this sail up, and I'll move on. Here we are. We're actually sailing this boat in the Regatta. There's Josie running over to one of the winches to do something. You see the men in the back sitting down. They're not goofing off. They're operating electric winches to trim that big mainsail. And I was trimming the fore mainsail, so not the large mainsail, but the next largest sail, the fore mainsail. And my foot is on an electric winch there to help me trim it. But for most of it, I was able to do it without using the winch. And Gary, you were taking care of the running back stays.
Running back stays for the foremain. Yep. So where it usually takes several people, Jeanine and I ran the foremain by ourselves. And with, you know, all they did was tell us, this is what we need done. We had that sail trimmed the whole time, more so than any other sail on the boat.
Well, we were having so much fun. We were like euphoric. So you see, I'm smiling here. It's because I'm happy. It was a very it just was a wonderful feeling to be sailing on that boat and to be participating in it. Now here's Pear. He was sort of resting / monitoring us as we were running around doing the trimming and the running back stays. And where was Highland? Well, Highland was actually on his way up the mast during the time we were sailing in the Regatta. And I had mentioned to the first mate, Timothy, I said, "Oh, you'll love Highland. He's very mechanical. He's very strong. He loves to climb mountains and climb rock walls, and he sails a lot. He'll be really useful." So Timothy said, "Hey, Highland, do you want to go up the mast and take some pictures?" So he sent him up the mast. Here he is at the oh, Gary, help me out.
As far as how high he is?
How high he is, yeah. He's at
the mast is 137 feet up.
Yeah, so he's halfway up here, and then here he is at the top. So while we were racing, Highland was at the top of the mast the entire time. And we had to tack, and I thought, uh-oh, and I asked Timothy, I said, "Wait a minute, we're tacking? Or shouldn't we tell Highland?" And he's like, "No, he'll figure it out. Well, he'll figure out that we're tacking." And another interesting thing is, and as a lot of you probably already know, but is that it took like, it seemed like forever to tack, just to do a tack, like 20 minutes or 30 minutes. The paparazzi were circling all the boats in the regatta, and the Invader was the largest boat, so they took a lot of pictures of it. And in this picture, you actually see Josie right in the middle. She's the person standing there in light colored clothing, and then this is Gary here. I'm kneeling down, so unfortunately I don't really show up in this picture, but that was taken during the regatta. And what I learned on this is that these regattas, yes, people wanted to win them, but what I didn't realize going into this is it's really more of a showcasing event of all these beautiful boats that have been well maintained or refurbished and are in beautiful condition. So it really is more of a showcasing event than anything else. And at the end of that first day, we all were very happy and had dinner. Alex made us a great dinner. And then I asked Alex, I said, hey, you know, that bar out there, that mahogany bar is so beautiful, but does anyone ever use it? And she said, I don't know. And I said, well, is it okay if I have a drink, you know, and sit at the bar? And she said, sure, help yourself. So I went to the bar and there was a bottle of port, and I decided to have a glass of port. Now that person standing there is Per. He saw that I was drinking something, so he got behind the bar and started serving drinks to a number of people. And Gary and Timothy were there. And what happened was we had a lovely evening, but the next day we got up and I came out to, you know, to have breakfast, and Timothy came up to me and said, who told you you could drink at the bar? And I said, what? I said, well, you were there. And I said, I talked to Alex. I said, was there a misunderstanding? I don't want Alex to get blamed for this if there's something wrong. And he said, well, there's a bottle of wine missing. I said, well, I had port. I had a little limoncello. What do you mean? And he goes, well, there's a $1,000 bottle of wine missing. And I said, really? Was it behind the bar? He goes, no, it was down in the cellar, in the bottom of the boat, in the wine cellar, and it's missing. I said, well, wow, you figured that out really quick, huh? And he's like, well, the Captain Mckelly took photographs of all the inventory down there, and he checks it daily. And he's already checked it this morning and noticed that bottle is missing. That was a special bottle that was given to the owners of the Invader, and they planned on celebrating with that in a month at a special party. That was being saved for that, and it is missing. And do you know anything about it? And I said, no. But the result of this episode here is that everyone thought that Gary and I had drank that $1,000 bottle of wine that first night. And there was a little bit of a cloud over our heads as we went around. And I frankly was just felt really bad about it. And I said, well, I'll replace everything at the bar that I know that we drank. And I'm happy to replace whatever. And we went downtown to the grocery store, and I filled up an entire cart with different alcoholic beverages. And it was, I think if I went to the Wyzetta Muni, it would have cost $2,000, but it was like $120 there. And we restocked the bar way fuller than it had been, trying to make amends and really not knowing what had happened and a little bit confused about the situation. So here's Cary Grant. I had to throw a picture in here of him with a bottle of wine in To Catch a Thief movie. Day 2 and 3 of the regatta, we actually were not able to sail. So here we'd had this great sailing experience, but it was discovered that there was a problem with the gaff saddle. Now this is, the gaff saddle is right here. It kind of looks like a saddle, and it attaches the gaff to the mast, and it is covered in leather that's hand sewn on. And it was discovered the leather had torn, and this had all just been refurbished. And so they were like, wow, how could it have torn? And it was decided to remove the gaff saddle to repair it that day. It was also a little bit stormy that day, and you know, because there was all new crew on the Invader, they thought, well, let's not risk anything. Let's try to repair this and not race today. So here's Highland and Toby, the second mate, taking that gaff saddle off. And actually, Gary was very instrumental in helping to sew up this gaff saddle. There was a guy that came in from the village too. That's the other guy, and he was a specialist in this. This is a shipbuilding town in Viareggio. They build. They have a lot of warehouses right there on the harbor where they're building ships, and they have specialists there that know how to sail and repair these older boats. So they were sewing up that saddle and repairing that. They still didn't know how it had torn. So there was a lot of investigation going on in relation to what on that mast could have torn the saddle, or what could have torn that saddle. Josie and Highland were working meanwhile on polishing brass winches, which they weren't real excited about, but I just took a little video of them polishing brass winches on the Invader. Working hard. So we worked on that for a couple of days. On day 3 in the evening, they had the big regatta party. I don't even know who won the regatta. We'd just been working on the Invader the whole time, but we actually were loving it because we were enjoying learning about this Invader boat. But Gary and I and Josie and Highland went to the party. There were hundreds of people. They had swordfish there, sushini, I think Gary said is the correct name for it, instead of sushi. Here's some of the sailors in their striped sailing uniforms. People were had their boats alongside the quay there, and you could go on and tour through different vintage boats. It was a very fun evening. And then the next day we got back to work on the Invader, and they were sending people up the mast to look for areas that may have torn this gaff saddle. And they did think that maybe some brass plating that had been up at the top of the mast might have been involved. They thought maybe it had been put on there incorrectly. And again, this work on the mast had just been done recently. And so they thought, wow, whoever did this maybe did put this brass plating on wrong. So they were sending people up and down the mast, and Gary was up there looking at it, and they offered for me to take a ride up to the top. And I did. Now this is about, the picture of me here is about halfway up. It's about halfway to the top, kind of at the level of the spreaders, or maybe a little bit below that. And there's some of the vintage boats that were in the regatta. You can see them down below. Day 5, they actually said, okay, we're getting ready to leave Viareggio in a day or two here. We have to pack everything up. It's the end of October. We're going into winter in Italy, and Viareggio has to be stored in the port of Genoa for the winter. And so everybody pitch in and help get things prepared for winter. One of the things was taking down the jib, which was laying on which was up on the bowsprit. And a lot of the crew was actually working down below that day on some things. There were some storage areas down below where sails and things were going into, and they were working down there. And Gary and I attacked this by ourselves. The jib, you can see on the left, Gary is up on the front of the bowsprit. I think it took us like 4 hours to get this sail off the bowsprit. I thought, and my feet were going through the holes on that netting. And so it was real tricky trying to stay on the netting and not fall through. But Gary, how that sail weighed a lot too. What would you say?
From what I'm able to research, it was most likely 20-ounce Dacron, weighing and is 836 square feet. So just the Dacron alone was about 116 pounds. The hardware, the shackles that attach to the forestay, those are solid brass. They're the size of my hand, and the forestay is 1 1/4 inch diameter stainless wire. Basically a 32 millimeter. And that overall sail laying on that bowsprit was several hundred pounds. And the two of us dragged it from the bowsprit, over the front gunwale and onto the deck, where we could then use the crane to move it around.
Yeah, it was, but we actually got the job finished with, did we even put it in the sailbag? Did we get that far, or was that where we stopped? I can't remember.
took, I think, 5 of us to get it into
That's
the
right.
sail bag.
Yeah. So the rest of the paid crew came up and they were like bummed out because they're like, okay, they spent all morning down below working. Now they have to come up and put that jib away. And here we had it already off the bowsprit and they were elated. And they're like, wow, great, you know. So so we actually, for being unpaid crew, we were working pretty hard. Here you're seeing some of the things getting covered up for winter that day. Meanwhile, well, Gary and I were working out there. We found out later, Mckelly, Captain Mckelly on the right, and First Mate Timothy had a heart-to-heart talk, and it came out that there had been a confession on what had happened to the $1,000 bottle of special wine. And by the time we found out about this confession, Gary was looking very vulnerable here in this picture, but he's actually tailing the line, keep holding somebody up at the mast. He's tailing it. It's wrapped around the winch and he's tailing it to make sure that nothing goes wrong. So he's laying on the deck with his head on a tennis shoe. And I was working nearby, polishing brass, I think. And the Captain Mckelly came up to Gary while he was laying there. Well, I thought, wow, what's going on? I better go over there because Gary's laying on the deck and I know Captain Mckelly is not happy with us and now what's going to happen. But I heard him say, Gary, I need to apologize to you and Jeanine. We thought that you and Jeanine drank that bottle of wine. And this has been a big issue on the boat because, you know, we agreed to take on this crew that we didn't know. And now a special thing is a special bottle of wine is missing on the boat. And now we have to report back to the owners and they're going to say, why did you take on this crew? And what were you thinking of? And so we've been very worried about it. We said, actually, someone has come forward of the paid crew and has confessed to finding that bottle of wine in the cellar and thinking, hey, that looks good. And they just drank it. And they said, so now we know it's not you. And we just want to apologize that you went through this week with us thinking that you had drank that wine. And we also want to say that you and Jeanine actually worked harder than the paid crew for part of the time, some of the time. And they said, we really appreciate all the effort you've put into working here on the boat. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Gary, but that was a big relief to us to hear that we were, the thief was caught. So here's To Catch a Thief. That was where the thieving episode, and Jeanine and Gary were exonerated. And I want you to note here, Gary is wearing his Wayzata Yacht Club hat in this picture. I think this is a great picture of Gary, and some Bayfield Regatta t-shirt while he's on the Invader. So Gary, do you have any comments on that?
No, it's actually, that's the Wayzata host
okay.
or skipper hat, the green one, which is what I was wearing, and the Star of the North Regatta shirt. But yeah, that the boat was just phenomenal, and Jeanine and I have a standing invitation to go back as crew at any time. So.
But we got so excited we were going to go out and celebrate that we were no longer the guilty ones. And everybody that night was waiting for me. We were actually, the whole crew was going to go out and have a nice fun evening in the town, and they were waiting for me and honking for me in the dinghy because I think they were going to drive to a new location on the water. And I came running up the companionway and I hit my head on some hardware on the companionway and just about passed out and thought, oh, you know, this is not good. And I went down below and looked in the mirror and there was blood all over my face. I washed off the blood and then I thought, wait a minute, I should take a picture of this before I washed my hair. But I was bleeding profusely and worried that maybe I would have a concussion or something, but I didn't go out with them that night. They did take the one piece of hardware off that my head hit and gave it to me as a souvenir. I did make that into a little necklace. The next night we did go out on the town, and here's showing some of our crew. Gary took this picture. We had a great time. And the next day we left Viareggio. And again, we did not sail. We motored back to the port of Genoa, but I think they were still concerned about possible repairs on this really fancy vintage boat. So they didn't want anything to go wrong. So they just decided to motor back. But I just took this little video of us motoring. It was a beautiful scenic ride back. So this would be our Italian Riviera motoring excursion back to Genoa. And we arrived in the port of Genoa. The next thing was everybody had to pitch in and help rinse everything down, get all the salt water off the teak decks, get salt water off every possible thing you could get it off there on the deck, in preparation again for winter storage, and also just to prevent the damage from the salt water. And then we all went our separate ways. So Josie went with Highland, and Highland took this picture. They went to various places in Europe for a week, and here they are at the Leaning Tower of Pisa. And I went on my way to meet up with Chet in London. Took the Eurostar, and here's the train station in London. And never did see Cary Grant or Alfred Hitchcock, but I think I felt their presence throughout the trip. I'm not sure about anybody else, but I felt like I was back in the movie To Catch a Thief. And I met up with Chet. He was glad to get me back in one piece after the adventure. And here we are in London. And we were actually able to make it to Cowes, which was the original inspiration of trying to go sailing in Europe. We did make it to Cowes after our scientific meeting. And here's where Cowes is located, at the Isle of Wight on the Solent in England. And I was able to go to the Beckham of Cowes store where the pharmacist had worked and look at thousands, where there were many thousands of pictures of regattas over the last century that he and his sons had taken pictures of. And I bought a coffee table book there. Here's Chet and I in Cowes. And lastly, Andy Spence was kind enough to write a letter of introduction for Chet and I to the Commodore of the Royal London Yacht Club, named Gary, David Gower is the name of the Commodore. And they allowed us to stay at the Royal London Yacht Club in Cowes while we were there. And in addition, I got to race in the last regatta of the season on the boats that they race on there. They're called Darings. And on the left, you see the Daring I was on. You can't see me, but I was on the boat at the time. And it was the Commodore's boat. So I was lucky enough to race with the Commodore. And he was vying for first place. And this was the last race of that regatta series. And he was vying for first place with another boat. And we actually got stuck in a current that started pushing us backwards. We were going downwind, our spinnaker was fully loaded, and suddenly we stopped and started going backwards. It was the craziest thing I've ever experienced, but apparently the currents there are known to do that. The boat that we were racing against neck and neck went right past us, so they caught a different current and they crossed the line first. But in the right-hand picture, that sailboat is the boat I was on crossing the finish line. We got second place. Chet took that. He was working on the race committee up at the top of the yacht club, and their race committee operates from up there. So we had a great time there. We want to thank Andy Spence for giving us that letter of introduction. I had so much fun. I sent an email to David Gower, the Commodore. I said, if we come back for Cowes Week next year, could I race on your Daring? And he emailed back and he said, well, you don't take up a lot of room, you're quiet, and you follow orders. I guess so. Yeah, you can race on the Daring. But then that never happened. We entered into the COVID period of our lives here, so we didn't do that. Gary traveled on to be with a large family reunion, touring all over Italy. A couple places were Florence and Rome. And just to make sure he was fully exonerated, he saw the Pope in Rome. So he had his own wonderful time after sailing with us on the Invader. And that is the end of our adventure story. And I think I will let Gary handle questions at this point, if there are any questions.
And if anybody was following the chats, I've been also running a commentary in there and answering questions as they came up. But if anyone has questions, I'm more than willing to help answer them. So.
Well, this is Jolene. I'm just going to jump in a couple of ones that were in the chat a lot earlier. Somebody had asked what year you took the trip.
October 2019.
Okay. And then how long on average did it take to get that, I believe, the mainsail up?
The mainsail, I think, took about 15 to 20 minutes to get it up. Just the mainsail alone. And it took just, well, about half the crew getting it up. And we had the 5 paid crew, the 5 of us, and then I think we had 4 or 5 other people that had joined us that were, I'd call them more professionals. They were all local vintage racers and were very familiar with doing gaff rigs.
Right. It looks like somebody just asked, did you say the mast was 137 feet high?
The main mast was, yep.
Okay.
If anybody's got questions on specs or history of the boat, I've got tons of it. It is an amazing boat. And none of the 4 of us that had gotten on the boat had ever been on a gaff rig before. And that, the crew, Timothy, the first mate and stuff, he's going, oh no, you guys don't know what you're doing, you know, you shouldn't be here. And he was so impressed by how much we were able to participate and handle that boat, including the skipper, that they said they'd race with us anytime, any boat.
Great. Another question, what's the displacement and the ballast?
Okay, displacement is, glasses here. Let me okay. Let's see, displacement. She's classified as a 214.2 ton boat. The ballast is lead, and she draws about 14 and a half feet. When they refurbished the boat and went down into, you know, the hull and just above the keel, they actually found a couple of bags of coal from that were placed there when the boat was originally built in 1905, because the owner was a coal magnet, you know.
Wow. Were all the sails made of Dacron? And then how many boats in the Regatta?
I'm not sure if we got a total on the number of boats in the Regatta. There were at least, if I remember, I don't have that information right in front of me, but if I remember right, by looking at the score sheet, there was probably about 20 to 30 boats. And I'm sorry, what was the other question? It was how many boats and
were all the sails made of Dacron?
Oh, all the new sails on this boat are Dacron. Yep, they're real heavy. They look like the original canvas, but they're bulletproof. And at 20 ounces, it's a really stiff, heavy material.
Mm-hmm. All right. Anybody else want to jump in, turn your mic on and or your camera and ask questions live? Feel free.
I just wanted to add, there was someone early on who asked a question about, are you motoring head to wind while hoisting? And
the motor was running at that time, yes. The winds were probably around 10 knots. and the motor was needed just to maintain head to wind. You saw how much that boom was oscillating. It actually, the boom itself is basically 87 feet long and weighs 2,000 pounds, a ton. And when the sail was up and the wind hit that thing, the whole boom just rippled with wave pattern. And there would be like 2 to 3 waves, almost 3 feet in depth, along the entire length of that boom. It was just phenomenal to watch.
Great. What's the material of the mast and boom?
The mast is ash. Let's see. It was. Let's see. The mast was. I'm sorry. The mast is Douglas and silver spruce, and it's a laminated construction and hollow, and it's 2-piece. Goes up to the spreaders, and then there's another mast that goes up from there.
The boom's the same thing?
The boom is the same thing, yep.
Okay.
And that would also be hollow.
Great. Anyone else have any questions?
The blocks were all bronze and wood ash.
Oh,
Go
Gary,
ahead, Craig A.
Jeanine, it's Craig A. Thank you so much for sharing. Obviously, a fantastic adventure you had in 2019. Gary, I really, I have questions, but also comments. I really appreciated the history and the details. And then, Jeanine, do I understand correctly that you have a piece of this like World War I sailing yacht that caused a bloody contusion on your scalp?
Yes, I have that piece. Yes, they gave it to me.
And like, how big is it?
Oh, it's probably 2.5 inches by 2 inches, probably. I made it into a necklace. Yeah.
You said a necklace, but that sounds maybe kind of heavyweight for a necklace. I'm thinking about all these bronze winches, which I did not get a chance to polish. Very disappointing.
Jeanine, if you can switch to slide 84. The part was actually part of the latch that held the companionway closed. And I'm actually, you went just past it. There you go. Those are actually my fingers with the glove on it, gloves on. And when I had my gloves on the boat, Timothy admonished me. He goes, "Nobody wears gloves on the boat."
So I said I had questions. You gave the displacement, but is this the same boat that had one or more heads in every stateroom with a bidet?
Yes.
So presumably when she was light and fast, I think you used that term tonight, one or the both of you.
Yep.
A lot of shit has been added on. And now a treasure, this brass necklace pendant has been taken off.
Between 2001 2003, the boat was in Viareggio, where they basically stripped it down to an empty, bare hull and refinished everything. to the original specs. The boat had gone through so many changes throughout the history, from being a huge restaurant to being a training vessel to almost being scuttled in Hawaii, where it actually lost its sailing status. And for somebody to purchase the boat, and I think they spent $15 to $20 million once it was in Europe to ship it and rebuild it. And now it's for sale for $5 million. But yeah, it's and the part that the part that Jeanine has could be from the original 1905 rendition of the boat.
Yeah, it's possible it is. I think they were more concerned about getting the blood off the teak decks. And they didn't care so much about my head. They had like 4 people scrubbing the blood up, and they were like, wow, if the owners see this, oh my gosh, you know, they're trying to get that cleaned up because it had sort of starting to stain the deck.
The lighting, most of each of the heads all had marble counters, brass and porcelain, you know, with sinks and heads and showers. There were 3 guest cabins. The main owner's cabin or stateroom, which is the one that we actually got to stay in, had 2 heads in it and 2 twin beds. The other smaller 2 guest rooms is where some of the crew was staying. Then they also have 3 other cabins, which I never got a chance to go see, which included the captain's quarters, and then the first mate and the second mate each had, you know, were using the other 2 cabins. But below the salon and bar and the lower deck, there was another whole layer, another whole floor below that, which is where the motor was, all this the extra refrigerators and tanks and everything else were down there. I mean, this boat is just huge. Let's see this.
Any other questions? What was the material of the hull? Did you say nickel steel?
It's a nickel steel. And that was designed that way to minimize any rusting. It was built in New York. Let's see, it's, I thought I had the city here. Oh, there it is. Yeah, it was commissioned by Roy Rayner. He was heir to the Coke company empire. George Lawley and Son were the builders from South Boston shipyards, but it was registered in New York. Sorry, it was built in Boston then. The designer was Albert Shelton Cheeseborough, who is he was a famous naval architect at that time, and the boat was built basically like all America Cup boats. It was built to win.
And Gary, what year would that be?
It was built in 1905 for the 1906 America's Cup. That was the original purpose, but they just never had the crew in time for the 1906.
So they built it in America.
It was built in Boston. It was completely refurbished or rebuilt in Italy.
And I understand it never actually got to compete, but who was the sponsor?
It was Roy Hayner, the original owner. He was heir to the Coke company empire, but he was also a coal magnate. So this is why they found 2 small bags of raw coal down in the keel.
Thank you. You said that, but I was going for nationality. I'm going to assume USA.
They're all Americans. Yep.
All right. Somebody was wondering if Per got his own boat mast fixed.
Jeanine, have you heard from him? I have not heard if he's gotten it fixed yet. I know it was, he was going to do it himself.
I think I found that it was for sale a couple weeks ago. I was looking online. So Timothy had contacted me a while back and said he was working for Per for a while. He left the Invader and started working for Per, helping to repair or fix up many of Per's many boats that are in harbors around Europe. So I guess that's sort of a lifestyle that Per has. And Timothy, I said, "Oh, that sounds like fun. Where are you now?" And I think he was in, I can't remember, it was some city in Italy. But he said, "Well, actually, it's not so fun because I'm on this yacht that Per has, and there's no running water and no toilets or anything." And I said, "Really? It's not the one that, it wasn't the same one that we had in Villefranche-sur-Mer?" And he said, "What?" He goes, "You mean there was another one like that?" And so it seems like Per is maybe he's a guy that buys boats that need a lot of work, and then he just kind of slowly works on it, sounds like.
Yeah, he was quite the character. Quite the bachelor, loved the ladies, loved the wine and the drinks and the parties and socializing, and just a huge passion for vintage boats.
All right. Any last questions? All right. Barb, you want to close this up here?
Sure. Well, that was quite the adventure indeed. I mean, and it all started from wandering through a vintage shop, as Jeanine said.
Here in town.
Yeah. I think you guys made the best of a fluid situation and quite a magical experience. Knowing that Jeanine especially references old movies. I mean, when you talked about the wine missing, all of a sudden it came to me, a movie that my husband John loves, Cane Mutiny, when Captain Queeg was wondering about the missing strawberries. And that was Humphrey Bogart. So it sounded like it was almost like a remake on that Cane Mutiny, but oh my gosh. Well, I'm going to have Sheila tell us about what's next up for our final regatta. And then I'm going to say one more thing after Sheila.
Sure. Hi there. So for our final Wanderlust talk, we will be learning about the Transpac, a 2,200-mile ocean race from Palos Verdes, California to Diamond Head, Hawaii. Joel Ronning, Eric Doyle, Charlie Schroeder, and Jonathan McDonough will share highlights of preparing for and participating in their 7-day journey aboard Catapult, Joel's Santa Cruz 70, with 6 other crew members in 2017. And as Barb mentioned, with this rainy, cold night, this talk, which is going to involve warm breezes and sun, hopefully, is going to be a terrific foray into our spring season.
Great. Looking forward to that for sure. Jolene, thank you for all your technological skills and your coordinating. Also, don't forget you can hone your own racing skills at the next virtual regatta on March 31st. And then there's a virtual happy hour on April 8th, and pretty soon we'll all be sailing.
All right. Thanks so much, Gary and Jeanine. We really appreciate the presentation tonight.
Thank you.
It was a lot of fun.
All right. So good night, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, good night.